Hi there, I'm Doy Santos, and you're on the cusp. Today on the cusp, we're going to be asking the question, what's wrong with the Philippines? But before that, for those of you who don't know me, a brief introduction. Over the past 12 years, I've been working as a policy analyst, working in various state agencies here in Australia. What does a policy analyst do, you might ask? Well, we're often asked to consider policy proposals put forth by politicians in order to determine how to make them better. Or, as the joke goes in my profession, when confronted with a set of bad policies, how to make them less bad. A few years back, I took an extended leave of absence in order to do some development work in the Philippines as a consultant providing technical advice to projects that were supervised by an international aid agency. It was during that time that I stumbled upon an idea for a social enterprise, which today assists numerous inner city youths in Metro Manila in acquiring the skill sets that they will need in the 21st century. I've been blogging on Philippine politics and society now for well over 10 years, and this is both on The Cusp as well as on other blogging sites. Some of my articles have been featured on GMA Network News site and the Rappler website. In future podcasts, I'll be talking to Filipino thought leaders and offering up some of my own considered policy options aimed at providing solutions to problems that affect many of our countrymen today. Since this is our maiden podcast, I'd like to start off by posing the general question, so what's wrong with the Philippines? In answer to that, you can possibly cite so many things. There's widespread poverty, corruption, you might cite terrorism, illegal drugs, criminality, even pressure from external forces from our neighbors in Asia or from ISIS. But what I would like to address today is something that I feel goes deeper than all of these issues. Something that affects our nation's ability to grapple with each of these critical issues. And that problem is the increasing polarization that's affecting our society today. Or as we say in Tagalog, yung pagkakahati-hati natin, yung pagkakawatak-watak natin. This, in my view, is a deeper issue that is gripping our society at large. And it's preventing us, actually, from moving forward on so many fronts. This polarization is what I'd like to call the Philippine Culture Wars. I've dubbed it the Philippine Culture Wars because on so many issues confronting many of our people today, two distinct cultures are emerging around quite opposite values and belief systems. When you go on social media, it's simply unavoidable. It doesn't seem to matter what the topic is. Whether it's the South China Sea, the drug war, declaration of martial law in Mindanao, people on social media approach these issues by using simply one of the two lenses consistently. It goes beyond the simple merits of the issues being talked about and often descends into a kind of theological debate between two opposite views, two opposite worldviews, two tribes. What am I talking about? Well, on the one hand, you have those who see the world as a system to be governed by rules, a rules-based world where people are to be treated equally based on their rights as humans. The people who subscribe to this view are often associated with the Liberal Party, or yung makadilaw crowd, the Yellow Army as they're called. The standard bearer of this group at the last election was Mar Rojas, and he often talked about establishing a rules-based society based on institutions and governance models. Now, they all obviously lost the last election, but the adherents of this view haven't stopped criticizing President Duterte for his attempts at addressing the challenges facing the nation, because they see these attempts as falling outside the bounds of the law, outside the rule of law. The notorious Davao death squads, for instance. On the other hand, you have those who support a more relational system of governance based on rights and obligations. One that is centered on trust in an authority figure. In this instance, it's trust in a strongman in the form of Rodrigo Duterte. Now, the people on this side believe that our rights as citizens are not absolute, but conditioned on our observance of the law and fulfillment of our obligations as such. So again, let me restate what I think are the two opposite camps, the two lenses through which people in social media and society at large approach any issue confronting us as a people today. These are, on the one hand, the rule of law prism, or rights-based system of governance. This camp supports civil liberties, international laws, norms, and agreements, such as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the Paris Agreement. In other words, they subscribe to a rules-based world order. Now, their view gained prominence during the two EDSA People Power uprisings in '86 and in 2001. And they represent what we call civil society, which simply means the business community, the clergy, and the cause-oriented groups. Now, they oppose the way President Duterte has pursued his war on drugs and his policy towards China. They want actually the Philippines to move closer to the US in order to check the rise of China, which they see as challenging international law, and particularly the arbitral rulings on the South China Sea. These people tend to see things in black and white, light or dark. The theme that President Aquino used when he adopted the slogan Daang Matuwid. To their opponents, however, they're derided as, a bunch of yellow tards. The Yellow Army. All right? They're derided for, squandering every chance to reform our society after being in power for nearly 30 years since EDSA 1. They are seen to focus too much on political correctness and complex rulemaking, which gets in the way of actually governing effectively. The niceties that we must observe in an ideal world. But in the real world, these things, they just tend to result in too much bureaucratic gobbledygook and bottlenecks. Now, these people, they tend to rely on Rappler and the Philippine Daily Inquirer for their news and their views. They also avidly like and share editorial comments from the Huffington Post, the New York Times, and Washington Post. Now, the leading proponents of this view on social media, they would be Manolo Quezon, the former Assistant Secretary for Presidential Communications, Lea Navarro, the former singer and convener of the Black and White movement, Jim Paredes, another Filipino artist who was a prominent anti-Marcos activist in the 80s, and a certain blogger who goes by the name of Joe America, whom President Aquino actually cited in one of his speeches as one of his favorite bloggers, because Joe, let's face it, only had nice things to say about President Aquino. Now, on the opposite side are those who follow a relationship-based view of governance based on rights and obligations. They adhere to what I would consider a more primordial form of governance, one based on trust and the reciprocal nature of rights and obligations that we as citizens are owed, and which in turn we owe society. You see, they don't believe that civil liberties as such is an absolute right. Instead, they tend to believe that our rights are conditioned on us performing our duties as citizens. So when we disrespect others by not fulfilling our obligations to them, they consider it only right for those in authority to curtail the privileges that we have come to take for granted. These people gravitate towards Duterte's style of leadership, or Dutertismo. Their acceptance of his more authoritative style of leadership is one based on trust, like that of a child towards a parental figure, a father figure. They're willing to embrace his tough love as a way to straighten out the excesses of our liberal order, which they claim has left us open to the predatory actions of powerful oligarchs on the one hand, and criminal syndicates and drug lords, as well as terrorists on the other. They feel frustrated and let down by the present system, which they feel gives too many protections to the corrupt criminals and terrorists. And they would regard law and order as the single biggest problem facing the nation today. They would see the nation's problems, in fact, as stemming from a lack of discipline, for which an external authority needs to impose a kind of discipline upon society to bring it back in shape. Now, they obviously detest the Liberal Party for what they claim is the LP's sense of entitlement to power. And they also sort of deride them for destabilizing President Duterte and seeking to derail his attempts at what they see as his desire to fulfill the country's yearnings for order amidst all the chaos that the Yellow Army supposedly left in their trail. They also resist the machinations of Imperial Manila as self-serving, arrogant, and callous, and regard themselves as the real people who have a common experience of living with the chaos, corruption, and criminality under previous dispensations. To foster a sense of community amongst themselves, they refer to each other as KDDS, or Duterte Defense Squad, as a way of reclaiming what that acronym used to stand for, the Davao Death Squads. But to their opponents, they are derided as a bunch of Dutertards who have not learned the lessons of history and who foolishly want to restore Marcosian style of governance and are willing to give China a free pass by not bringing up the case involving the South China Sea, which the Philippines actually won. if this would smooth relations between the two countries. They rely a lot on social media, blogs, and alternative press for their news. Mainstream media from the US and Imperial Manila is considered polluted by liberal Western thinking by them. The leading proponents of this view include Assistant Secretary for Communications Margo Uson, Manila Times columnist Sas Rogando Sasot, and a blogger named RJ Nieto of Thinking Pinoy. There also seems to be a general changing of the guards involved here as well, with prominent voices of the Yellow Army either being middle-aged, of a certain age, in their 40s like myself or older, while the KDDS crowd are in their 20s and 30s. That's what I'm guessing, at least. These culture wars had their forerunners in previous times. Under Ferdinand Marcos's regime, there was a polarization and demonization of opposite forces. It was Ferdinand Marcos, the tyrant, versus Aquino, the communist collaborator. This resulted in the first EDSA, People Power Uprising of 1986. Under President Erap Estrada, the Masa, who were his base, or what the other side tended to regard it as the Great Unwashed, were pitted against civil society, or evil society, as it was termed, during EDSA Dos and Tres. And today, what we have are the yellow tards versus the Dutertards. But what's different now is the fact that we have online sites, the proliferation of blogs, social media, YouTubers, which allows the virtual coming together of each tribe under their own banners. The sharing of stories, of propaganda, the spreading of narratives and counter-narratives, whether true or fake, to perpetuate each culture, each belief system, making each one more set in their own ways. So it's actually possible these days to live in your own bubble, reading and consuming thoughts and ideas that agree with your own, reinforcing, in a self-reinforcing echo chamber, which perpetuates your own biases and prejudices. To take one view in social media these days, it actually means identifying oneself with either one tribe or the other. One entire belief system, would you believe, which defines who you are in terms of these culture wars. So the polarization of our society occurs amidst even the crisis that's gripping the nation today. The latest one involving the siege of Marawi City is a case in point. When one side was concerned that abuses by the security forces might take place after President Duterte declared martial law on the entire island of Mindanao, after ISIS militants took over the city of Marawi, the other side then sought to portray them as being weak on national security. So at a crucial time of national emergency, both sides were so busy bickering with each other, busy scoring cheap political points, making hay of the mistakes, the expected missteps that would happen in such a crisis in order to gain advantage for their own cause. Now, this simply will not do. Each is just unwilling to accept that the grievances or views held by the other side might actually be legitimate or grounded in some reality. In the world that we live in today, truth is not as important as winning the debate. Trust in their own belief system, in their own leaders, seems to trump the truth or any evidence pointing to the contrary of their beliefs. So, what happened to the middle ground? What happened to reasoned debate in social media, you might ask? The reality is that those who try to be neutral don't gain many followers. They don't get the hits, they don't get the likes or the shares in social media. In SOCMED, the angrier you are, the more provocative your views, and the more partisan you are, the more you will get attention, and the more viral you will become. So SOCMED actually reinforces bad behavior in a way. So instead of debating how we might fix the problem of ISIS in Mindanao and getting the peace process back on track, what happens? We're engaged in this finger-pointing exercise over who is more responsible for the present trauma that's besetting us now. Who overlooked the threats that were lurking and allowed them to fester and reach a boiling point? Folks, this simply is not the way we are going to progress as a nation. If we are going to move up in this world, it's not going to be by stepping on our fellow citizens. Both sides are going to have to show some restraint, to show some capacity to hear what the other side is saying, and to resist the temptation to demonize and polarize. My final point is this. Let's have a proper debate about ideas and issues. Instead of calling each other names and painting the other side as evil, we might do well to actually listen, acknowledge, engage, and empathize. Because we actually want the same thing. We just differ on the path to attain those things. Let's work at finding common ground instead. Let's try to find ways of reconciling our divergent views and start trusting one another again. Instead of breaking off into all our separate, polar opposite camps, let's try to engage each other. Politics, after all, used to be reserved for election years. At the end of the election cycle, both sides shook hands and then just proceeded to work together to make the country better. Nowadays, it seems that the election cycle never ends. We are in a continuous campaign mode, the election never stopped. And politics tends to consume our day-to-day existence. The internet, you see, is so geared towards the endless cycle. But what we need to be mindful of, what we need to be conscious of, and what we need to do is gear ourselves up for a more mature, elevated discussion of legitimate policy concerns. We need to go beyond the daily messaging and the desire to score points for our side and show genuine empathy and understanding for the other. Now just imagine what would happen if we actually did that. This has been the first edition of The Cusp. You can find future podcasts by logging on to my blog site, cusp-ph.blogspot.com, or by following my Twitter handle, cusp_ph. Follow my channel by clicking the subscribe button if you are watching this on YouTube. And I'd also love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation flowing. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you again on the next edition of The Cusp.